Hi, welcome back. I'm going to give you a little garden tour today of the progress that is happening. I'm Delisa Renadeo, and this is June the 11th. And so I want to show you how things have changed since May 13th when I showed you how to plant some things. So if you've seen that other video, and remember, I planted a cover crop last fall of a whole mixture of all different kinds of things. And some of that had come up again this spring. And so I showed you how I was planting among the cover crop plants. And some of those looked like grass because they were wheat and triticale. And those are both grasses. So I just kind of emptied out thinned out a spot and stuck my plants in amongst them. Well, since then, I discovered that that grass just kept growing taller and taller. We kept cutting it off, and so I decided this isn't working. So let's get rid of this grass. So I've pulled it all out, and so we won't see much of that left. But what we will see is a lot of other cover crop plants, mostly radishes and some collards. And they're growing all over the place here, and they weren't showing at all when we did the last video on May 13th. So what I'm doing is when they get kind of big, not super big, but I'll show you in a second, I actually am using a pair of scissors and cutting them off right above the ground level, and we're eating them because these greens, the radish greens, are great. We are eating them steamed with the kale and cabbage that we eat every day. And I'm also adding them to our salads. So it's great to have these fresh salad greens. And then I'm going to show you the other plants that I started back in May, and we'll get to see how much they've grown. Okay, so I'm going to show you first how I just cut off these greens that are my cover crop, which have really made my garden a lot more prolific this year. In this bed, I've got a variety of different salad greens. And so I've got some lettuce I planted, an arugula, bok choy, mizuna. These are all for salads. But then I've got all these other ones. These are the cover crop plants, and I can tell them apart because the leaves are different. And so I'm going to cut those, and we'll start eating them, like today. And I just take a handful and cut them, and I leave the roots in the ground because they will just decompose in there, and that will be fine. And it's actually helpful to get these out of the way so that the plants that I've planted have room to grow. So this is arugula, and these leaves are getting big enough now that I really don't want the cover plants in the way. But it doesn't take very long to fill up a bowl of this, and I've got this all over the garden. Now, of course, the goal of the cover plants, cover crop, is to cover the ground. Okay, I'm over here now in the kale section, which I planted a month ago, and they were just little plants about this big when I put them in the ground, which I started in the house and nurtured them. But look at them now. I have 4 different kinds of kale, and so you can kind of just look up and down at them, and you see there's lots of different fairly big leaves for this early in the summer. And on the other side of the kale from me is some lettuce. Now these lettuce leaves I planted later. I didn't plant them the same day as the kale. And so of course they're smaller, but they're not going to get as big as the kale does. I haven't started to pick it yet, but very soon I'll start just picking the outside leaves and just let them grow. I want to show you something that grew all by itself over here. When I say all by itself, what I mean is I didn't plant it this year, but this right here is cilantro, and I planted it here last year and the year before, and when it went to seed, then it shed its seeds in this area, and now it's growing all by itself. And so when I see these, oh, here's another one. This one's smaller. And I've seen them in some other places, one way on the other side of the garden that I didn't plant it there. I think it's probably been at least 5 years since I planted it over there, but I still have some coming up. So I welcome them and say, I'm happy to see you. So in this other bed, just the next bed over from the kale, I've got some more lettuce and spinach, and they're all different varieties. And of course they're interspersed with my cover plants, which, you know, still eating those every single day. The spinach is something that I pick it when it's not real big yet, because it starts to bolt and go to seed very quickly, and then it gets bitter. And so I've started eating these outer leaves, and I keep my eye on it because I don't want to let it, you know, once it bolts, it just doesn't taste as good. So anyway, these will be pulled out of here pretty soon, just because they are going to bolt. I want to show you something that the garden gives us as a special gift. This is called lamb's quarter. It's not very big yet. It's a weed. Most people just pull it out and they say, oh, those damn weeds. But I don't. I say, welcome. I love you so much, because it's one of the tastiest, mildest greens that you could possibly ever eat. And it comes all by itself. And so I look around and I note where they are and make sure that they have room to grow. And when they get a little bigger, then I start to pick them. And I prefer them cooked, but you can eat them raw too. I just want to show you the peas. These are snap peas, the kind that you eat the shell and all. And these are going to get really tall. That's why we have this fence. They're going to get probably at least 7 feet tall. And I did actually start these in the house and then planted them out here when they were probably 2 or 3 inches tall. And I discovered that that is a really good way to get them started, so that they don't come out into the, if you plant the seeds in the cold soil early in the spring, it takes them a long time to germinate. But if I germinate them in the house, it's pretty quick. So I'm going to show you some that I planted a little bit later without, all I did is sprout the seeds in the house. I didn't actually place them in soil, but once they had a little teeny sprout on them, we put them out in the garden, and they grew very quickly out here. So again, that's a way to get a head start on growing your peas instead of sticking your pea seeds in cold soil. So these are the peas that we started just from a little sprouted seed in the house. And that way, and they've actually grown, they're almost as big as the ones that I actually grew in the house first. And then all of this other greenery in front of me, these are all the cover plants that I am pulling up or cutting off, and we're eating those every day in our salad and steamed greens. I want to show you something else that grows every summer in the garden. This is a viola. It's like a type of miniature pansy. And these are beautiful and edible. And so I like to decorate my salads with these. And they are growing all over the place. And you have already seen them in the pictures, but you may not have known what they were. So over here is some more violas that have not yet bloomed. And I'm going to be thinning them out a little bit because they're so thick that they would be so crowded they hardly get to bloom. But I always leave some around the edge of the garden because they're so pretty. And I love to decorate my salads with them. You can also eat the leaves if you want to. Here we are in the carrots. They're very small still. We planted them as seeds, tiny little seeds, 4 weeks ago, May 13th. And they take a while to germinate, quite a while. And then they grow very slowly for a while. And you'll see in my next update, if I do that in a month, that they'll be a lot bigger by then. But I've got 4 rows of carrots in here, which you can't really see. And then this row right here is rutabagas, and they need to be thinned because they're very, very close together, and I need to thin them out so that they have room to get bigger. So I have some more carrots over on this side, and I need to get these cover plants out so that the carrots will have room to, you know, to see the sun. So I have another bed right here with a variety of different salad green, well, mostly different kinds of kale and collards, and some Swiss chard, and then of course a lot of these cover crops that are sprouting up in here. So these did not get planted quite as soon. They've probably been in the ground for about 3 weeks, and again they're growing very, very fast. Now the Swiss chard, you can recognize it because it's got a shiny leaf, and those I did plant a seedling, but they were tiny little seedlings when I put them in the ground, so they have not grown nearly as much, or they're not near as big as the kale. But I'm going to have to, well, I'll just pull these right here, pull those out because I want to leave room for the Swiss chard. Actually, a lot of these are daikon radish. You probably can't see that, but a daikon radish gets a great big bottom on it, like looks like a carrot. And of course, one of the benefits to the garden when you plant those is that they loosen the soil way down deep. But we're going to eat the greens. Now let's go take a look at the potatoes. Okay, I'm over in the potato patch, and these are the potatoes right below me that we started 4 weeks ago, May 13th. And they are looking gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So I have a row here, and then another row very close here, which is going to be interesting to see how I manage that. They're normally not that close together, but I wanted to plant a lot of them this year. So we've got other rows of potatoes, 140 potatoes. And Charlie planted them all, except for the ones that I demonstrated. But we'll be mulching up over the top of them with leaves pretty soon, because once the potatoes start to form under the ground, they start to break up through the soil, and we don't want the potato to get any sunshine on them because then that turns them green. So normally people hill the potatoes, which means bringing soil up over them, but I don't really have room to do that in this bed, so I'm going to mulch them with leaves instead. But let's look behind me at all these beautiful strawberries that are blooming. Every place where there's a blossom, there's going to be a berry, and they are just happy this year. They of course come back every year, and I thin them out and then they just fill back in again. Are you looking cute, Heidi? Okay. So while we're over in this part of the garden, let's take a little look at the rhubarb. We have a lot of rhubarb. Big, giant rhubarb. And people ask me all the time, what do we do with all this rhubarb? We admire it. We tell it how beautiful it is. We look out at it and say, isn't this gorgeous? And then we pick some of it, and I don't cook with sugar, as some of you know, but I do sweeten things with dates, so I do make some desserts with this, but most of this is just for admiring. And it makes a nice little decoration, a decorative hedge between the vegetable garden and the rest of the yard. So I'm over in the squash patch, and I have 3 different kinds of squash: zucchini, yellow, and butternut squash. And squash do not like cold weather, so I didn't get these in the ground until about the 1st of June. And this is the 11th, so it's been in, and the weather's been pretty cool since then. So you might notice that we have all these white pieces of fabric around. That's called row cover. And I've been keeping them covered most of the time because that holds the heat in a little bit and it protects them from the wind. It's it actually, you know, it's very breathable. It's not like plastic. But I do take it off so that I can water. So I want you to see how small this squash is now. This is a butternut squash. And by the time we shoot the next update, it should be, if all goes well, it should be very big. I've also seeded some new cover crops in this area, which we'll see how they do. I have another bed with squash in it and different kinds of squash. And some of my cover crops are in here as well. Okay. As I said, squash do not like cold weather. So we had a really cold night right after I planted these. So I want you to see this squash isn't looking too good. This is a butternut squash and it's got some leaf damage. It might recover or it might not. I started some new seeds in the house. They're not even up yet, but I might replace this if it doesn't start to bounce back. So while we're over here, let's take a look at the apple tree. So we're in full bloom here and it smells wonderful. Oh, I wish you could smell that. It is just sweet and wonderful. I love it. So in the fall, I will be picking these apples and probably slicing them up and dehydrating them so that I can store them all winter. They're delicious that way. So we've got lots of currant bushes, and I don't think I'll take you around to show you everything yet. They are blooming now, but they don't have berries yet. They will be ready toward the end of July. So that's it for now. That's the end of this tour. Just a little progress report. So the next time we'll see things that are a lot bigger. Thanks for joining me.